Bella was a shy, soft-spoken gray tabby who lived with Claire Reynolds on a quiet stretch of rural farmland in late summer 2020. She was small for her age, timid around strangers, and preferred the familiar comforts of her screened porch to the wider world beyond. On the morning of September 14th, Claire left the door ajar as she carried laundry outside. When she returned moments later, the loose lower corner of the porch screen had been pushed open. A faint metallic jingle marked Bella's collar bell as the cat slipped into the yard and toward the edge of the orchard that bordered the Reynolds property. Claire thought little of it at first. Bella often prowled the grass near the house, watching birds and insects before retreating inside. By midday, however, Bella was nowhere to be seen. Claire called her repeatedly, shaking a container of dry food, but no movement came from the rows of apple trees, swaying in the light breeze. At sundown, concern began to turn to panic. Claire walked every path, checked under every bush, and enlisted help from 2 neighbors. One neighbor mentioned seeing a flash of gray near the orchard's eastern fence line earlier that afternoon, but could not tell if it was Bella or another cat from down the road. As darkness fell, Claire searched with a flashlight until her voice was hoarse. By the early hours, she found the first trace. A small tuft of gray fur snagged on the splintered edge of an old wooden crate leaning beside the orchard's aging tool shed. The fur matched Bella's coat. Claire crouched low, running her fingers along the broken slat, unsure whether Bella had squeezed through or been forced inside. The shed looked rarely used, its padlock missing, the hinges rusted. Pulling on the warped door, Claire felt resistance from within. Something heavy was pressing back, preventing it from opening more than a few inches. She could not see inside, only darkness and the sharp scent of damp wood and fertilizer. Claire called out Bella's name again, her voice trembling. No answer came. Summoning her strength, she pried harder, but the door groaned to a stop. Whatever lay behind it was wedged firmly in place. The neighbors arrived moments later, holding lanterns, watching nervously as Claire struggled to move the barrier. They debated whether to force the door off its hinges at once or wait for daylight. The uncertainty was unbearable. Every second felt wasted while Bella might be trapped or injured inside. At last, Claire pushed just far enough to slip a beam of light through the gap. The dust-choked interior revealed rows of tools, broken crates, and shadows stacked in confusion. Yet the source of the obstruction remained hidden from view. The shed seemed almost deliberately blocked, as if someone had arranged it to keep people out. A dull scraping sound from deep within made Claire freeze. Was it an animal, a falling object, or something else entirely? Unable to see clearly, Claire stepped back. Heart pounding. The neighbors exchanged uneasy glances. They had all assumed Bella's disappearance was a simple case of a curious cat wandering too far, but the shed door told a different story. This was no ordinary missing pet search. Something inside did not want to be disturbed. As the lantern light wavered on the warped boards, Claire whispered, "Bella." There was only silence. The obstruction would not budge, and the fear that Bella might be inside, hurt, trapped, or worse, was impossible to shake. Claire decided to wait for morning when tools and proper lighting could be brought in, though every passing hour would feel unbearable. The first chapter of Bella's disappearance ends with that locked door, standing between hope and dread. The orchard is still, the night wind rattling the branches, as if holding its own breath. Claire walks back to the porch but cannot bring herself to go inside. She sits on the steps, flashlight still clutched tight, listening for any sound from the darkened shed. The silence is absolute. As dawn approaches, the blocked door becomes more than just a barrier. It becomes the first undeniable clue. What exactly is keeping it shut? Is it a fallen crate, a pile of tools, or something placed there on purpose? When investigators arrive, they will find that this shed, and whatever lies inside, marks the true beginning of a mystery that will stretch far beyond the Reynolds property. The orchard, once a peaceful backdrop to Claire's life, is now the center of a search that no one expects to end quietly. Deputy Harris arrived early the next morning with 2 patrol officers and a handful of volunteers. The search began at first light, when the orchard rows were still cool with dew. Harris instructed the group to comb every row shoulder to shoulder, moving slowly and leaving no space unchecked. Claire Reynolds joined them, clutching Bella's favorite cloth mouse. She squeezed it repeatedly, producing the faint squeak Bella always came running to investigate. Children from nearby homes followed, shaking treat bags under the trees in hopes that the familiar sound would draw the cat out if she were hiding. The search grid started at the edge of the Reynolds property and worked eastward. Volunteers peered into crates, overturned buckets, and lifted loose boards. They checked every hollow log, hay bale, and drainage pipe. Mid-morning brought the first clue: small paw prints near the irrigation ditch on the south side of the orchard. The prints matched a cat's size but ended abruptly at the damp soil's edge. There were no drag marks, no sign of a chase or struggle, and no further impressions leading away. It was as though Bella had simply vanished where the ground turned soft. As the line of searchers advanced, an elderly neighbor, Mrs. Keller, stopped to share what she recalled from the previous evening. Standing near the fence with her walking stick, she told Harris she'd seen a man carrying a box at dusk, walking quickly down the service path that cut across the orchard. She could not identify the man, nor describe the box beyond its rectangular shape. Her eyesight was poor, and the fading light offered little detail. Still, the statement unsettled Claire. Why would someone be carrying a box through the orchard at the very hour Bella disappeared? The group continued their slow sweep through midday heat. Claire's voice grew raw from calling Bella's name. The cloth mouse squeaked without answer. The volunteers began to tire, but Harris urged them to press on, promising they would cover every corner. The only sounds were the rustling of branches, the crunch of boots on dry grass, and the occasional buzz of insects rising from fallen fruit. By late afternoon, the search line reached the old tool shed where Claire had struggled with the blocked door the night before. Harris examined the warped frame and rusted hinges, but decided to wait before forcing it open completely. As they stood in the orchard clearing, a soft sound carried on the wind, faint but unmistakable. Claire froze, heart pounding. It was the high, thin cry of a cat, distant but real. "Bella," she whispered, moving closer to the shed. The meow came again, slightly louder, then fell silent. Harris motioned for everyone to be quiet. They approached slowly, lantern light cutting through the dim interior as the door inched open against resistance. The meow sounded one last time, and stopped the instant the opening widened. Inside, the shed appeared unchanged from the previous night. Scattered tools, overturned crates, and dusty corners thick with cobwebs. Harris shined his flashlight along the floorboards, looking for movement, but saw nothing. Claire called Bella's name again, her voice echoing in the cramped space. There was no reply. Whatever they had heard was gone, leaving only a tense stillness. Harris stepped back, concerned. "If she's in here, she's hiding where we can't see her," he said quietly. He noted the uneven floor, the warped boards, and the way the crates seemed stacked deliberately to block certain corners. Volunteers searched the perimeter, but no fresh tracks appeared. The paw prints by the irrigation ditch remained the only physical sign of Bella's path. As daylight faded, Harris ended the organized sweep for the night, promising to return with proper equipment to examine the shed more thoroughly. Claire lingered by the door long after the others left, listening for another cry that never came. The shed stood silent, its dark interior concealing something that felt closer than ever, yet still completely out of reach. Deputy Harris returned to the orchard shed at sunrise, this time with 2 deputies carrying pry bars, flashlights, and gloves. The door opened after a hard shove, crates and rusted tools sliding aside as the barrier finally gave way. Inside, the air was close and sour, heavy with the smell of damp wood and old fertilizer. Dust, motes hung in thin shafts of morning light, illuminating rows of long unused equipment stacked haphazardly along the walls. Claire Reynolds stood just behind Harris, taking in the clutter she swore had been undisturbed for years. She had used the shed only to store small gardening items. Now heavy sacks of lime leaned against one wall, several burst open from age. Apple crates, warped and splintered, were piled high in one corner, forming an unstable tower that looked ready to topple. As Harris and his deputies cleared space, one particular crate caught his attention. Unlike the others, its lid was blotched by a dark, irregular stain. The wood was dry, but the discoloration was unusual, almost as if something had seeped into it long ago. They set the crate aside carefully. Beneath it, Harris noticed uneven floorboards covering a recessed section of the shed. The planks were swollen, warped, and nailed down crudely, forming a sealed crawl space no one had mentioned before. Claire stepped forward quickly, shaking her head. "I've never seen that," she said firmly. She explained that the shed was old when her family purchased the property. No one had ever spoken of a hidden space, and she had no memory of any repairs done to that part of the floor. With effort, Harris pried up the boards, splintering the edges as they cracked free. The deputies shined flashlights inside. The crawl space was shallow, dusty, and empty. No Bella, no food, no nesting material, nothing alive. Only a faint odor drifted upward, a smell neither purely chemical nor purely organic, but close to rot. Harris crouched low, running his gloved hand across the dirt floor. There were no paw prints, no fur, and no sign that the area had been recently disturbed. Claire covered her mouth, staring into the hollow. If it was sealed, how could she even get in there? She asked. Harris had no answer. The boards had been nailed tightly enough to require force for removal. Whatever the space had been used for, it didn't seem intended as storage for anything living. After documenting the opening and photographing the strange stain on the crate lid, Harris ordered the shed cleared of all loose items. The volunteers carried tools, broken sacks, and crates outside, leaving only the open cavity and bare floor. Claire glanced repeatedly toward the shadows in each corner, still calling Bella's name even though she knew the cat wouldn't answer. Once satisfied the shed contained nothing else, Harris prepared to leave. Claire lingered near the doorway, her eyes on the planks surrounding the crawl space. Something caught her attention, a glint of metal wedged tightly between two old floorboards beside the opening. She knelt and reached for it. With a quick tug it came loose, a tiny brass bell engraved with one word. Bella. It was the collar bell Claire had personally attached to Bella's neck when she was a kitten, but Bella had never been inside that sealed space, and Harris had just confirmed it. The crawl space showed no evidence of entry or exit, and no creature could have slipped through without leaving a trace. Claire's hands trembled as she held the bell. How is this even here? She whispered. The deputies exchanged wary glances. If the crawl space had been closed off for years, then someone must have placed the bell there deliberately, after Bella vanished. Harris logged the item carefully, photographing it before slipping it into an evidence bag. The shed, once thought to be a simple hiding place for a lost cat, was now a scene demanding deeper investigation. The strange stain on the crate, the sealed hollow, and Bella's collar bell wedged between untouched boards told a story that no one yet understood. As Harris closed the shed door, he looked at Claire. "This isn't just a missing pet case anymore," he said quietly. Claire nodded silently, clutching the empty bell as if it were a lifeline. The orchard around them was still and bright, but the air felt heavier than ever. By the third day of searching, Deputy Harris requested backup from County Animal Control. What began as a desperate hunt for a missing pet was now treated as something more serious, possibly deliberate harm or theft. The discovery of Bella's collar bell inside a sealed crawl space left too many unanswered questions. Officers set up a perimeter around the orchard, keeping volunteers away while specialists examined every corner of the shed. Claire Reynolds waited near the fence, uneasy but determined to stay close to the investigation. While officers worked, she recalled her growing tension with one of the orchard hands, Mark Dalton. Months earlier, Dalton had complained about Bella prowling near the fruit bins, claiming she scared off field mice he used to trap. Claire remembered his exact words. "If that cat keeps getting in my way, I'll get rid of her." At the time, she dismissed it as idle frustration. Now those words echoed with new weight. Deputy Harris brought Dalton in for questioning on site. Dalton denied any involvement, insisting he hadn't seen Bella on the day she vanished. But when asked about the sealed crawl space, his answers grew hesitant. He admitted knowing about the hollow under the shed, but claimed it had always been empty and irrelevant. Harris pressed further, noting Dalton's shifting tone and his refusal to meet Claire's eyes. To confirm whether Bella might have died nearby, Animal Control deployed a cadaver dog trained to detect animal remains. The dog sniffed through the shed, circling the boards around the opening, but never gave a clear alert. Its inconsistent behavior suggested traces of something faint, not enough to confirm a body, but enough to raise suspicions. Claire watched every movement anxiously. The lack of a definitive signal left her caught between hope and dread. If Bella wasn't there, where was she? And if someone had taken her, what was the reason? After the sweep ended, officers expanded their search to the orchard grounds. As they moved debris near the western fence line, a deputy lifted a sun-faded tarp and uncovered a small digital camera, its plastic casing cracked, and its lens smashed inward. The device looked as though it had been deliberately stomped. Harris bagged it immediately as evidence. When the investigators powered the camera at the station, the memory card still worked. The final photo stopped everyone cold. Bella caught in the beam of a flashlight at night, her collar bell reflecting the glare, eyes glowing against the darkness. The image timestamp matched the evening she disappeared. Whoever took it had been close, within feet. Claire's heart pounded as she recognized Bella's posture in the photograph, crouched and tense as if startled. Harris studied the frame closely, noting the angle of the shot and the orchard rows behind her. This wasn't a random picture taken days earlier. It showed Bella alive and outside, hours before she vanished. The smashed camera suggested the photographer wanted the evidence destroyed. Harris turned to Claire with a firm expression. "We're not dealing with an accident anymore," he said. "Someone here saw Bella that night, and didn't want us to know." The orchard that had once felt safe now seemed like a trap, filled with unspoken secrets. Dalton denied owning any camera. He swore he hadn't worked late that evening. Yet his nervousness when asked about the shed and his prior threats toward Bella kept him at the center of suspicion. Harris ordered the camera to be analyzed by county forensics, determined to recover every image stored inside. For Claire, the shift from searching to investigating was a painful reality. Bella wasn't just missing. Someone had been close enough to photograph her, close enough to make her disappear, and desperate enough to destroy evidence afterward. The orchard was no longer just an open field. It was now a potential crime scene. At the county forensics lab, the smashed camera was carefully opened under magnification. Its cracked screen was beyond repair, but the memory card remained intact, holding more than just the single shot of Bella's glowing eyes. Specialists pieced together fragments of damaged files, coaxing corrupted images back to life, frame by frame. The first recovered photographs were shaky, blurred images of orchard rows taken at night. Flashlight glare streaked across tree trunks, giving the pictures a frantic, uneven feel, as if the photographer had been moving quickly or glancing over a shoulder. Then came a partial shot of a figure's arm, pale in the flash, gripping the handle of an animal carrier. In another frame, Bella appeared in mid-motion, back arched, ears flat, hissing directly at the camera. The images painted a story of pursuit rather than a casual nighttime stroll. Metadata confirmed. The photos were all taken within a tight 2-hour window on the night Bella vanished. The timestamps matched Claire's memory of when Bella slipped out through the kitchen door. Whoever held the camera had been close on her trail, close enough to see the cat fight back. Deputy Harris brought Mark Dalton in again, for questioning, this time at the sheriff's office rather than on the orchard grounds. The recovered evidence left little room for denial. After an hour of silence and sharp glances toward his boots, Dalton finally admitted the camera was his. He claimed he had set it up to catch raccoons raiding fruit bins, insisting the photos of Bella were an accident. "Then why destroy it?" Harris asked, sliding the cracked casing across the table. Dalton shifted uncomfortably. "It fell. Tractor ran over it. I guess it looked worse than it was," he muttered. But the muddy tread marks on the casing didn't match tractor tires. Harris knew it had been smashed by a boot, not a wheel. Claire, sitting behind the glass in the observation room, clenched her fists. Dalton's story didn't hold up. If he truly set out to monitor pests, why were there no photos of raccoons? Only of Bella and a shadowy figure carrying a crate? Forensics analysts continued combing through the card even as questioning went on. They managed to recover one more image, heavily corrupted but salvageable with digital repair. When the picture appeared on the screen, the room went silent. Bella was inside a small wooden crate, pressed against the corner, her eyes wide with fear. The slats of the box cast dark bars across her fur, and her collar bell reflected a pinpoint of light. Whoever took the photo had been standing close enough to see her panic and document it. The file data showed it had been deleted minutes after being captured, a deliberate attempt to erase evidence. Harris slid the printed copy across the table toward Dalton. "Care to explain this?" Dalton stared at it longer than expected, jaw tight. "That's not what it looks like," he said at last. "I didn't hurt her. I found her in the crate already." "Where?" Harris demanded. Dalton hesitated again, then offered a vague description of the orchard's west side. "The same area where the camera was found under the tarp. He insisted he left the crate there and walked away, when Bella hissed and scratched his hand. But if that were true, why smash the camera? Why delete the clearest image of all? Claire's pulse thudded in her ears as she listened through the intercom. Every word sounded like a lie layered over another lie. Dalton's explanations bent under their own weight, yet never fully broke. He claimed he feared getting blamed for trespassing on private sections of the orchard after hours. "I panicked," he repeated. "I didn't take the cat." Still, the evidence told a different story. The camera was in his possession. The photos were taken during the crucial hours. The crate shown in the deleted image matched the weathered wooden boxes used to ship fruit from the orchard shed. When the interrogation ended, Harris had no direct proof of Bella's fate, but he had a stronger case than ever that Dalton knew far more than he admitted. The sheriff's office prepared to map out Dalton's movements minute by minute on the night Bella vanished. Claire left the station numb. The image of Bella in that crate burned into her mind. She had wanted answers. Instead, she had new questions darker than the old ones. Who else might have been involved? If Dalton didn't harm Bella, why hide the evidence? And if he did, where was she now? The night air outside the station felt heavier than before. Somewhere in those orchard rows, the truth was buried, and Claire feared that finding it might come too late. Dalton's account unraveled with every question. He swore he'd left the orchard before dusk, but his phone betrayed him, pinging off a nearby tower long after sunset. Deputy Harris laid the crate photo on the table, Bella's frightened eyes staring up like an accusation. "I never touched her," Dalton said, voice rising. "I just tried to lure her out before she scratched up the apples." But if that was true, why was his camera smashed, its lens ground into the dirt? Why did the stain on the crate lid smell faintly of copper? Claire's fingers trembled as she studied Dalton's face. Was he lying, or terrified of someone else? The deputies pressed harder. "If Bella ran off, why does your timeline not match? Who sealed that crawl space?" Dalton's answers came fast and sloppy, looping back on themselves like tangled string. Out in the orchard, the rows felt different now. Not peaceful, but watchful. Claire walked between them, clutching Bella's collar bell, listening to the brittle rustle of leaves. If Dalton wasn't the one who hurt Bella, someone else had crossed their land that night, someone bold enough to carry a crate through an open field. Then came the break no one expected. A new flash drive from a neighboring farm's security camera. The footage was grainy, but clear enough to make Harris curse under his breath. At midnight, long after Dalton claimed to have left, a second figure appeared, hooded, alone, carrying something bulky into the orchard shed. The grainy video flickered on the deputy's laptop, each pixel struggling to hold its shape. A hooded figure crossed the orchard rows, cradling something against their chest. Not a crate this time, more like a feed bag, its outline sagging under the weight. As the person turned, a single glint betrayed them, a reflective patch on the sleeve, the kind stitched onto the high-vis jackets worn by orchard staff. Claire's stomach tightened. Only a few people had those jackets, and all of them were supposed to be asleep at midnight. Deputy Harris froze the frame. "See that?" He pointed at the patch. "Matches the gear your supervisor Angela Moore wears. Same stripe placement, same width." Angela didn't flinch when they brought her into the station. She sat straight-backed, arms crossed, auburn hair pulled tight under a cap. "Yeah, I was there," she said before anyone asked. "I came to check irrigation lines. Pump sensor kept throwing alerts." "At midnight?" Harris asked flatly. "Orchards don't keep bankers' hours," she shot back. "I didn't see your cat." But the deputies weren't buying it. They replayed the footage, showing the bulky feed bag-shaped object in her arms. Angela insisted it was a coil of hose, but her voice thinned around the edges. Claire couldn't take her eyes off the screen. The shape, the way it sagged, the way Angela held it like something that could wriggle free. A forensic team combed the shed from corner to corner, every loose board pried up, every dusty corner swept. In the far back, under a shelf, they found a small spill. Pellets of cat kibble, mingled with a strange powder. The odor wasn't food-like at all, but sharp and chemical. "Bella's food never smelled like that," Claire whispered. She'd handled enough bags to know. Harris crouched beside the evidence bag. "If this is what it looks like, someone's been doctoring her feed." Angela stayed stone-faced as they zipped the sample away. "I've got nothing to do with that," she said. "Test whatever you want." The toxicology report landed just after dawn, crisp pages still warm from the printer. Deputy Harris flipped through them in silence, brow tightening with each line. "It's pesticide," he said finally, "but not the stuff you pick up at the co-op. Restricted use only. Same formulation Angela ordered for orchard blight last spring." Claire felt the words hit like stones. "You mean Bella ate this?" "We don't know yet," Harris replied. "All we know is someone had access and it's not sold within 50 miles of here." Angela was back in the interview room by mid-morning. She didn't deny ordering the compound. In fact, she admitted signing for it. "It's standard for the orchard," she said, voice flat. "We spray when the humidity spikes. Keeps the fungus off the fruit." "Did you ever see Bella around during spraying days?" Claire asked sharply from the corner. She wasn't supposed to speak during questioning, but the words forced their way out. Angela's eyes flicked over to her, then back to Harris. "The cat wandered, sure, but I never saw her in the rows when we sprayed." It was true Bella had a habit of slipping through fence gaps, darting under rows of apple trees just as mist sprayers roared to life. Claire remembered calling for her from the driveway, only to have Bella saunter back hours later with damp whiskers and the faint tang of orchard dust in her fur. Could that have been enough to harm her? Or had someone made sure of it? Harris shifted the questioning. "We need to talk about the crawl space under the shed," he said. "The one that's sealed with new plywood. Why cover it up?" "Because raccoons get under there," Angela snapped. "We were losing wiring to their teeth. I told Dalton to board it up last month." "Mind if we take a look?" Angela hesitated. Not long, but enough to notice. "You got a warrant?" "Not yet," Harris said. "But we can get one." Angela leaned back in her chair, arms crossed again. "Then you know where to find me." By afternoon, whispers had started among the neighbors. People wondered why deputies kept circling the orchard, why Angela's truck sat in the station parking lot all morning. Claire hated every glance, every unspoken question. She wanted to believe Angela. That this was just bad luck, that Bella had gotten into something she shouldn't. But the evasiveness was harder to ignore. Then came a knock at Claire's door. It was Mr. Bishop from the adjoining property, holding a plastic grocery bag at arm's length. Inside was a small blanket, faded blue with frayed corners. Claire recognized it instantly. Bella's favorite, the one she used to knead into a nest on cool nights. "Found this behind your shed," Bishop said. "Looked out of place. It's stiff, like something soaked into it. Figured you'd want it." Claire's hand shook as she took the bag. The fabric looked wrong, clumped, discolored, faintly smelling of something sharp. Harris arrived minutes later, taking the blanket with gloved hands and sealing it in an evidence pouch. "If this has the same pesticide on it," he murmured, "we'll know for sure whether someone dosed her bedding." The results came back faster than Claire expected. Deputy Harris met her in the orchard lane, face grim, holding an evidence envelope as if it might burn through his hand. "It's Bella's blanket," he said quietly. "DNA's a match. And it's saturated with the same restricted pesticide we found in the shed." Claire felt her knees go weak. "But there's no blood. No sign she was hurt?" "None," Harris admitted. "The lab says the fibers are stiff but not torn. It doesn't look like a struggle. More like it was soaked. Either by accident or on purpose." The words hung in the damp morning air. Claire stared past Harris at the orchard rows, where volunteers were still combing the grass. She imagined Bella padding through those lanes tail high, curious nose twitching. Was it a tragic mistake or something far darker? Angela Moore and Mark Dalton sat separately at folding tables set up near the patrol cars. Both looked weary, both angry, and both were pointing fingers. "She's lying," Angela said, glaring at Dalton when Harris approached. "I never touched that cat. He's setting me up because I caught him slacking off." Dalton slammed his palm on the table. "She's the one ordering pesticides no one's supposed to use. You think I know how to seal up crawl spaces? You think I bury fake tags for fun?" "Fake tags," Claire repeated, not sure she'd heard right. Harris turned to her. "This is the other reason I called you out here." A gardener clearing weeds behind the tool shed had found a small tin box, half rusted and hidden under soil and roots. Inside was a single object, a silver bell tag engraved with Bella's name. "But I have Bella's tag," Claire whispered, clutching at her necklace. She always wore it now, strung beside her house key like a talisman. Harris nodded. "We checked. The one you have is the real deal. Worn edges, same scratch marks you described. This one's brand new. Someone had it made recently." Claire's stomach turned. "Why would anyone make a copy of my cat's tag?" "Good question," Harris said. "A duplicate tag means planning, not an accident. Someone wanted to create confusion, make it seem like Bella was somewhere she wasn't." Angela leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "This is ridiculous. I've got nothing to do with fake tags. I was just checking irrigation lines. The same as every other night." Dalton sneered. "Yeah? Then why were you skulking around the shed at midnight with a feed bag?" Angela shot back. "Why was your camera pointed at Bella instead of raccoons?" The deputies had to separate them before the argument boiled over. Claire stepped away, her head pounding. Every new clue only made things murkier. Bella's blanket, stiff with poison. A sealed crawl space with no cat inside. 2 orchard workers who hated each other. And both had reasons to lie. And now a counterfeit tag buried like some kind of calling card. She knelt in the grass, staring at the little tin box now sealed in plastic evidence. For a moment, she almost imagined Bella's soft mewling from somewhere deep underground. "Claire," Harris said gently, "we're treating this as a criminal act now. Somebody went to a lot of trouble to cover their tracks." Claire's voice shook. "But if they went to all this trouble, does that mean Bella's gone?" Harris didn't answer. His silence was worse than words. As the sun dipped low behind the orchard, the search party packed up, leaving only the deputies, the 2 suspects, and a family in agony. The tool shed loomed like a shadow against the glowing rows of trees. Somewhere in this web of lies was the truth about Bella, and someone was determined to keep it hidden. Just before Claire left, a young officer jogged over from the far edge of the orchard. He held out his phone to Harris, who frowned at the screen. "What is it?" Claire asked. The officer hesitated. "We found records from a local engraving shop. Someone ordered multiple cat tags last week, but they paid in cash." Claire felt her heart skip. "Multiple?" The officer nodded. "Not just one duplicate. At least 3. Harris's jaw tightened. "So whoever did this wasn't improvising. They were planning something." Claire's throat went dry. If Bella's disappearance wasn't random, if someone had gone to this much effort, what were they planning next? The tin box was small enough to fit in a child's hand, its lid warped with rust. When Deputy Harris pried it open, Claire felt her breath catch. Inside, cushioned in a square of oilcloth, lay a brass collar tag stamped with the single word, Bella. But that was impossible. Bella's original tag, smooth, factory-made and fitted to her signature bell, still dangled from Claire's keychain at home. She'd kept it there since the night Bella vanished, a talisman she refused to part with. "Could someone have made a fake?" Claire asked, voice tight. Detectives canvassed the nearby engravers. The answer came quickly. Yes, Dalton had ordered a hand-engraved tag months before Bella went missing. His excuse was casual. "Cats lose collars all the time. I was just being helpful." But Claire remembered every heated exchange in the orchard. Every time Dalton swore Bella was a nuisance. A backup tag for a cat he barely tolerated felt less like kindness and more like obsession. Angela Moore, the orchard supervisor, didn't buy Dalton's story either. "You don't engrave a duplicate unless you plan to use it," she said, arms crossed during questioning, "and Dalton's the only one here who would bother." Still, nothing tied him directly to Bella's disappearance. No fur, no blood, no remains. The evidence was circumstantial and slippery as oil. Angela hinted Dalton was setting her up, while Dalton spat that Angela was hiding more than irrigation problems. Deputies found themselves in a game of accusation ping-pong, each player lobbing blame across the orchard. The investigation shifted again when they returned to the shed. The warped boards where Bella's collar bell had first been discovered were finally pried loose for a full inspection. The floor cavity was shallow, packed with decades of dust and orchard grit. Nothing living could have fit there for long, but something dead could. Harris crouched low with a flashlight. "Hold on," he muttered, sliding his gloved hand between the joists. "There's something wedged down here." Claire's stomach lurched. For a moment she thought it was a bundle of fur. But as Harris lifted it free, the truth was worse in its simplicity. A single paw, desiccated, mummified by time and air, small enough to belong to a young cat. Claire staggered back, a sob breaking loose before she could stop it. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "It can't be." The deputies didn't speak, but the orchard fell silent around them as though holding its breath. Even Angela and Dalton, summoned for observation, looked pale in the fading light. The paw told its own grim story. Bella hadn't simply run off. She'd been trapped, or worse, placed here deliberately. But where was the rest of her? And why would someone go to the trouble of burying a duplicate tag while leaving this horrific evidence under the shed? Harris bagged the remains carefully. "We'll send it for DNA. But I think we already know whose this is." Claire's hands clenched into fists. Grief, cold and sharp, cut through her like wire. For months she'd lived in limbo, hoping Bella might reappear with burrs in her fur and hunger in her eyes. Now that fragile hope was collapsing under the weight of something uglier than loss. Betrayal. Angela broke the silence first. "This doesn't make sense. If Dalton hated that cat so much, why leave her here?" Dalton barked out a bitter laugh. "Funny, I was going to ask you the same thing." Detectives stepped in before the argument could boil over. The orchard was no longer a missing pet scene. It was a crime scene, and someone had gone to considerable effort to make sure Bella disappeared without answers. Claire stared at the rusted tin box, the duplicate tag inside. Whoever engraved it hadn't planned for Bella to be found. The staged collar, the sealed crawl space, the toxic residue. All threads of a web leading somewhere dark. But now there was something solid. A paw. Proof of harm. And with proof came purpose. The boards came up one by one, each pry of the crowbar sounding like a heartbeat in Claire's ears. A heavy odor escaped the earth beneath, faint but unmistakable. When the deputies crouched down, with flashlights, Claire's world shrank to a single, dreadful truth. Nestled in the dirt lay the small, curled shape of what was once Bella. The orchard sack that held her body was stiff with age and dust, its faded fibers clinging to the floor joists. Only a single paw protruded, dry and weightless as parchment. "Bag it, carefully," the lead investigator murmured, voice subdued. Claire turned away, her throat raw, yet she couldn't keep herself from glancing back. Bella, mischievous, fearless Bella, was reduced to a fragment of bone and fur. The lab confirmed it quickly. The paw belonged to Bella. More remains lay further beneath, wrapped tightly in the same orchard sack. Yet the cause of death was maddeningly inconclusive. No signs of broken bones, no clear wounds. But the test told a different story. Traces of the same restricted pesticide once found in the shed and on Bella's blanket. Dalton was called in first. He sat stiffly in the interview room, arms crossed. "I didn't do this," he growled. "I may have chased that cat off a few times, but I never hurt her." When confronted with the orchard sack, his face twisted with something between anger and fear. "That's not mine. Angela was the one always spraying those chemicals." Angela's turn came next. She folded her arms, almost mirroring Dalton. "He's lying to save himself. I never touched that cat," she insisted, though her eyes darted at the mention of the sealed crawl space. "Dalton's been looking for a way to ruin me ever since I reported him for skipping shifts." Both of them had motive. Both had access to the shed. Both had lied about where they were the night Bella disappeared. Claire's grief had calcified into something sharper. Fury. "Stop pointing fingers!" she snapped when the two crossed paths outside the station. "One of you killed her, or both of you know who did." Back at the orchard, investigators combed every inch of the tool shed. Under ultraviolet light, faint smears glowed along the floorboards where the sack had rested. But the most unsettling discovery wasn't chemical. It was human. On the outside of the orchard sack, written in black marker, were two words, "Not here." The handwriting didn't match Dalton's or Angela's. Forensic analysts compared samples, time cards, work logs, old invoices. Nothing lined up. Whoever handled Bella's remains wanted them hidden, but also wanted to send some kind of message. Claire stared at the sack in the evidence room, her hands trembling. Someone else had been in that shed. Someone who had fooled them all while Dalton and Angela bickered and deflected. The lead detective closed the folder with a snap. "We're running this handwriting through every Orchard employee on record. Someone signed this sack." The call came just after dawn. Claire barely heard the detective's words over the pounding in her chest. They had a match. The handwriting on the Orchard sack belonged to Thomas Reeve, the elderly seasonal worker who had picked apples alongside Dalton and Angela for decades. When they found him, Thomas was sitting on his porch, a chipped mug of coffee in one hand, a folded sun hat in the other. His voice shook when he saw the deputies. "I knew this would come back someday," he murmured. Inside the interview room, Thomas didn't bother with a lawyer. His lined face was pale but calm, as though confessing were a kind of relief. "I found her by the south fence line," he said softly. "Bella. She was staggering, foaming at the mouth. I thought she'd gotten into something bad. Pesticide, maybe. I picked her up to get her help, but she died before I made it to the shed." The detectives exchanged glances. "Why didn't you call anyone?" Thomas's eyes glistened. "Because I've been warned about those chemicals before. I was afraid they'd think I poisoned her. I panicked. I wrapped her in a sack and put her under the boards to keep her safe, I guess. I didn't know what else to do. I wrote, 'Not here,' so they'd look somewhere else if anyone came searching." Claire listened from behind the glass, her heart pounding. The truth was so ordinary it hurt. Not murder. Not malice. Just an old man's fear. And a little cat who wandered too far. Laboratory reports confirmed Thomas's account. Bella's remains carried traces of pesticide, but not enough to prove deliberate poisoning. More likely she had licked residue off her paws after roaming through recently sprayed rows. It was a tragic accident, covered by silence and suspicion. Dalton and Angela were both cleared of wrongdoing in Bella's death, though neither escaped unscathed. Investigators fined them heavily for mishandling restricted chemicals, their sloppy record-keeping laid bare. The orchard owner, furious at the scandal, terminated both contracts on the spot. When Thomas finally faced Claire in the hallway, he removed his hat and held it to his chest. "I'm so sorry, miss," he whispered. "I never meant to hurt her. I just didn't want to lose my job." Claire swallowed hard, unable to speak. She wanted to rage at him, to scream that Bella had been her family, but the frail man before her looked as if the weight of the past 2 years had already crushed him. She simply nodded, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. 2 weeks later, the shed was demolished. The boards that had hidden Bella were splintered to dust, the earth beneath raked clean. Claire stood barefoot in the grass as the machines hauled the last of the debris away. For the first time, the orchard didn't feel haunted. It felt quiet. In the soft light of evening, she dug a small hole under Bella's favorite apple tree, the gnarled one with low branches, perfect for climbing. She lowered a tiny wooden marker into the earth, its edges carved with a paw print. "Sleep well, troublemaker," she whispered, pressing the soil gently over it. The apple tree swayed as a breeze drifted through, scattering pale petals over her shoulders. Claire closed her eyes, letting the warm wind dry her tears. The orchard would grow again. So would she.